They didn't just steal her money, they tried to erase her mind, her history, her entire life's work, piece by painstaking piece. Imagine your own flesh and blood, your nephew, meticulously planting errors in the research that defined you, fabricating flaws in your life's passion. Imagine them whispering doubts about your sanity to everyone who mattered, your doctor, your lawyer, your oldest friends. All while smiling to your face, offering comfort, offering help. It sounds like something from a twisted psychological thriller, doesn't it? But it happened, this kind of insidious betrayal. It happens more than we think. I'm Victoria, and on this channel, we talk about the unbelievable, the shocking, the stories that make you question everything. Especially the stories where the quiet ones, the underestimated ones, the ones pushed into a corner, finally roar back. Today's story comes from a client. We'll call her Dr. Evelyn Hayes, a brilliant historian, internationally respected, sharp, meticulous, with a mind like a steel trap, honed over 50 years of dedicated scholarship. Or so she thought. Her field was niche, complex, 17th century legal history, focusing on forgotten precedents, women's property rights hidden in plain sight. Work that required absolute precision, absolute clarity. What happened to Evelyn? It's a chilling reminder, a terrifying cautionary tale, that sometimes the deepest wounds, the most devastating betrayals, come from the hands you trusted most, the smiles you welcomed into your home. But Evelyn, she didn't just crumble. Oh no, faced with total erasure, financial ruin, the theft of her very identity, she did something extraordinary. What she did next, it's pure, cold, calculated fire, a masterclass in reclaiming power. You absolutely need to hear this. Subscribe right now, hit that notification bell, because the way Evelyn turned the tables, using the very skills they tried to discredit, it's a story you won't forget, it's a survival guide, wrapped in righteous fury. Now let me step back, and let Evelyn tell you, in her own words, what they tried to do, and how she unleashed a storm they never ever saw coming. It started so subtly, like the first hint of mildew in an old library, almost imperceptible, a faint, unpleasant scent you dismiss until it's everywhere. My nephew Marcus, my sister's boy, and his wife Chloe, they became attentive, suddenly, almost overwhelmingly so. After my husband Arthur passed, after 52 years together, the house felt impossibly large, cavernous. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was deafening, amplifying the grief. They filled that silence, at first, bringing meals, casserole dishes piled high, often things I didn't particularly care for, but I choked them down, wanting to appreciate the gesture. Checking in daily, phone calls morning and night, then visits, then they just seemed to be there all the time. Handling small errands, picking up prescriptions, dealing with the gardener, things Arthur used to manage, things I could have managed, given time. You need to rest, Aunt Evie, Marcus would say, his voice like warm honey, that slightly unctuous tone he always had. Grief takes a toll, let us take care of things, just for a little while. Chloe would rearrange cushions on Arthur's favourite chair, tidy my desk, putting papers away. We just want you to be comfortable, not stressed, she'd murmur, patting my hand with cool, dry fingers, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Comfortable, yes, that was the word. They made me comfortable, compliant, vulnerable. My work, my research, it's always been my anchor, my passion, my reason, decades spent buried in archives across Europe, piecing together forgotten lives, forgotten laws, forgotten truths, unearthing the voices silenced by time. My personal collection of primary source documents, letters, diaries, obscure legal treatises from the 1600s, fragile pamphlets, court records I'd painstakingly transcribed. It was my legacy, my contribution, more valuable to me than any stock portfolio, more precious than the house itself. Marcus, he suddenly seemed interested. He'd never shown more than polite disinterest before. Now he asked questions, intelligent questions, I thought, about provenance, about preservation. He even offered to help digitize some of the more fragile papers, to preserve them for the future, Aunt Evie, he'd said earnestly. A digital backup is essential these days. He worked peripherally in academia, a junior lecturer in a tangentially related field, history adjacent, you might say, always seemed a bit overshadowed, ambitious but lacking the dedication, or perhaps the insight. I thought maybe he finally appreciated the depth of my field, or perhaps he saw an opportunity, though I didn't let myself believe that, not then. Chloe, she took over the household accounts, the bills, the banking. Just temporary, Evie, while you grieve, she'd said, bringing stacks of papers to sign, direct debit forms, bank mandates. Always with a plausible explanation. This is just to consolidate the utility bills, makes it simpler. Or the bank needs this updated authorization now Arthur's gone. Always when I was tired, late in the evening or distracted by a memory, a wave of sadness. Power of attorney, just a precaution, Aunt Evie, standard procedure, in case anything happens, you know, if you had a fall or something. Marcus presented that one, looking solemn, responsible. Access to my investment accounts, the ones Arthur had managed so carefully. Easier for us to manage the upkeep on the house this way, pay for repairs directly, Chloe explained smoothly, keeps everything transparent. Transparent, another word they twisted. Small withdrawals at first, then larger, justified as necessary expenses. Home repairs I never actually saw being done. Specialist medical consultations I supposedly needed but never attended. Charges for private nursing care that never materialized. They were so careful, so solicitous, weaving a web of concern. My old friends, my colleagues, they'd call less often, or their calls wouldn't be put through. Marcus would answer the phone sometimes, my phone, kept conveniently near him. "Oh, Aunt Evie's resting just now," I heard him say more than once, his voice lowered confidentially. "She gets confused easily these days. Poor dear, best not to tire her." He'd relay messages, selectively, omitting invitations, downplaying colleagues' concerns. Or not at all, creating an information vacuum around me. Then came the whispers, the subtle suggestions, planted like invasive weeds in fertile ground. To my longtime family doctor, Dr. Peterson, a man I'd known for 30 years, "She's been forgetting things, doctor, quite significant things, appointments, conversations we just had," Chloe confided during a checkup she insisted on accompanying me to. To my lawyer, Mr. Davies, who handled Arthur's estate, "We're worried about her judgment. She mentioned wanting to donate the house to an obscure historical society. Seems impulsive," Marcus reported, inventing a conversation that never happened. To the few family members who lived farther away, my cousin in Canada, Arthur's sister in Australia, "Evie's not quite herself, the grief, it's hit her harder than we expected. She's very fragile," painting themselves as devoted caregivers. They painted a picture, carefully shaded, of a frail, confused old woman losing her grip, needing protection. Needing their asterisk protection, their control. The archive, my precious archive, housed in the library Arthur built for me, Marcus spent hours there, ostensibly helping, scanning documents, organizing files. He brought me tea frequently when he worked there, chamomile, to help you relax. Sometimes it tasted slightly off, metallic, bitter. Afterwards I'd feel fuzzy, sleepy, my thoughts like wadding through mud. "Just relax, Aunt Evie, let me handle this," he'd say, guiding me to my chair. "Conserve your energy." I started noticing small anomalies in my digital research files, the ones Marcus was digitizing, dates slightly altered, creating impossible timelines, footnotes misplaced, weakening key arguments, citations pointing to the wrong sources, sometimes deliberately misleading ones. Minor things, easily dismissed as my own fatigue, my own failing memory, my grief, just as they intended. I felt a flicker of unease, a tiny alarm bell, but I pushed it down. How could I suspect Marcus, my own sister's son? It must be me. My online access to bank accounts, suddenly blocked. Technical issues, Aunt Evie, some security update. We're sorting it out with the bank, Chloe assured me smoothly, taking my laptop away to fix it. It never quite worked properly after that. My mail, Chloe started collecting it directly from the postman, meeting him at the end of the drive. Saves you the walk, dear, especially when it's damp, she'd say brightly, presenting me with a carefully curated selection, mostly junk mail, bills conspicuously absent. Doubt began to curdle inside me, a cold knot of fear tightening in my stomach. Was I losing my mind? Was this what agging felt like? This fog, this uncertainty, this constant second-guessing? They were so kind, so concerned, their faces masks of loving care. It must be me. Mustn't it? The financial drain became harder to ignore, despite their gatekeeping, statements intercepted, calls blocked, but occasionally, something slipped through their net. A final demand notice, tucked inside a catalogue, for a substantial property tax bill I thought was paid quarterly via direct debit, the debit Chloe had set up. A call from my bank's fraud department about unusual activity, large transfers. I happened to answer the phone myself that morning. Marcus snatched the receiver almost immediately. A misunderstanding, Aunt Evie, crossed wires, all sorted, he said breathlessly, his hand shaking slightly as he hung up. But the seed of suspicion, it was planted, watered by their evasiveness, their constant control. They weren't just managing my affairs, they were consuming them, systematically, voraciously. My savings, depleted, transferred out in ways I couldn't yet trace. My carefully chosen investments, liquidated, often I later learned at suspiciously low points in the market, benefiting someone, but not me. My reputation, the bedrock of my professional life, being subtly dismantled, brick by insidious brick, through whispers and sabotage. They moved into my house, officially, occupying the master suite, to provide round-the-clock care, they announced to the family network, painting themselves as martyrs, sacrificing their careers, their lives, for poor, fadding Aunt Evie. Their performance was flawless, eliciting sympathy and admiration. Chloe began redecorating, with appalling taste, replacing my cherished antiques, pieces Arthur and I had collected over decades, piece by piece, with bland, beige modern furniture, claiming mine were too delicate or needed specialist restoration. I suspected she was selling the originals, quietly, online, pocketing the proceeds. Marcus spent more and more time in the archive room, my library. He installed a new lock on the door, for security, Aunt Evie, to protect your valuable papers. He carried the only key. The air in my own home grew thick with their presence, their control, their lies. It felt like breathing second-hand smoke, constantly. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life, unheard, unseen, irrelevant. Trapped not by bars, but by feigned kindness, suffocating concern. And then, the moment that changed everything, the moment the fog didn't just clear, it evaporated, replaced by pure Arctic rage. It wasn't a grand confrontation. It wasn't a dramatic discovery of a hidden bank statement. It was quieter, more insidious, overheard words not meant for my ears, and far more wounding because of it. I was resting in the drawing room, or rather pretending to nap, a habit I'd developed. My hearing has always been sharp, and stillness invites revelation. I lay on the sofa, eyes closed, breathing evenly, Listening, always listening. Marcus and Chloe were in the hall, just outside the partially open door, their voices low, complacent, arrogant, believing me to be asleep, or perhaps simply not capable of understanding. Chloe was complaining about a dinner invitation they had to decline, from some friends of theirs. Honestly, another night wasted babysitting. She sighed dramatically. When will this be over? Marcus laughed, a dry, dismissive sound, utterly devoid of warmth. Patience, darling, almost there. A few more months at most. The lawyers are finalizing the competency assessment paperwork. Dr. Evans bought our concerns completely. Hook, line and sinker. Dr. Evans, the geriatric psychiatrist they'd insisted I see, the one they'd prepped with stories of my decline. Marcus continued, once that's signed off, full guardianship, then we can clear out this dusty old museum, sell it, and finally move somewhere sunny. Museum to my home, filled with memories, with love, with Arthur. And that ridiculous archive, Chloe added, her voice dripping with scorn, laced with a petty jealousy I hadn't recognized before. All those musty old papers, are they even worth anything, apart from the few bits you photocopied for your project? Some of the actual documents have value, yes, Marcus replied coolly. I've identified the key ones, but the real value, darling, is getting her declared legally incapable. Her actual research, honestly, it's laughable in places. I've spent months correcting some of her more outlandish theories online. Subtly, of course, planted enough errors in the digital files, tweaked her arguments just enough. It reads like senile ramblings now. Senile ramblings. My life's work, groundbreaking work on marital property law precedents, dismissed, deliberately corrupted, by him, my own nephew. He went on, warming to his theme, boasting, my contact at the university press, Professor Davies, owes me a favour. He's already sowing doubts about her latest submissions, questioning her methodology. It'll be easy to discredit everything posthumously, or even prehumously, once she's officially gone, mentally anyway. Gone, is he? He wasn't just stealing my money, my home, he was stealing my *mind*, my legacy, my intellectual contribution, erasing *me from the scholarly record, potentially planning to claim some of my research as his own. Chloe giggled, a horrid grasping sound. You're terrible, Marcus, truly terrible, but clever. Needs must, my dear, he said smoothly, his voice laced with smug entitlement. Besides, she owed us, after all father did for her side of the family back in the day. A blatant, outrageous lie. My family had always been the stable ones, financially secure. His father, my late brother-in-law, had been a charming wastrel, borrowing heavily from my parents, from Arthur and me, debts never repaid, promises always broken. The entitlement, the callousness, the sheer breathtaking cruelty of it, washing over me, wave after wave. It wasn't grief fogging my mind, it wasn't age dulling my senses, it wasn't fatigue causing the errors. It was them, their calculated, suffocating kindness, their insidious poison, dropped into my tea, whispered into receptive ears, keyed into my digital life's work. In that moment, lying perfectly still on the sofa, eyes closed tight, something inside me fractured. No, not fractured, sharpened, honed to a razor's edge. The despair, the confusion, the hurt, it burned away, cauterized by the sheer heat of my anger, leaving behind something cold, hard, diamond bright. Furies. But not the hot, sputtering kind, not the kind that leads to shouting or tears. No, this was glacial, absolute, precise. They thought I was a frail old woman, fadding into the twilight, a nuisance to be managed, then discarded. They had no idea, the kind of archives I kept, not just on paper, locked away in my library, but in my head, 50 years of discipline, observation, analysis. They thought they were rewriting my history, controlling the narrative. They were about to learn, I wrote the damn book on settling scores, using evidence, logic, and relentless determination. Okay, I need to jump in here for a second. Victoria again. Can you even imagine, lying there, helpless, hearing that, knowing the people you trusted implicitly, your own family, were systematically dismantling your life, your identity, your legacy, purely out of greed, resentment, and breathtaking arrogance? The level of betrayal, the calculated cruelty, it's staggering, it makes you sick to your stomach. And that comment, senile ramblings about decades of meticulous, respected scholarship, that's not just theft, that's annihilation, that's trying to destroy the core of who she is. Many people would break, completely, spiral into despair, and who could possibly blame them? The weight of that malice is crushing. But Evelyn, Dr. Hayes, that moment, it didn't break her, it forged her into something stronger, harder. What she did next, it required incredible courage, nerves of steel, meticulous precision, and a type of ruthlessness born from righteous fury. It required her to become the historian of her own vindication. If you're finding this story compelling, gripping, perhaps even infuriating on Evelyn's behalf, please take a moment, click that like button, show some support for Evelyn and others who have faced similar invisible battles. It helps stories like hers get heard, helps fight that feeling of isolation and invisibility she endured for so long. Now, back to Evelyn, and the beginning of her astonishing fight back. The rage was a physical thing, a block of ice lodged in my chest, radiating cold determination, but my mind was suddenly crystal clear, sharper than it had felt in months. The fog was gone, replaced by focus. They thought I was confused, slipping, losing my faculties. Excellent, let them continue to think it. Their arrogance was their Achilles heel. My perceived weakness would be my shield, my camouflage. I needed proof, undeniable proof, not just of the financial theft, which might be explained away as mismanagement, but of the deliberate sabotage of my research, the calculated poisoning of my reputation, the conspiracy to have me falsely declared incompetent. Marcus was clever, digitally altering files, manipulating metadata, leaving a minimal obvious trace, or so he believed. He underestimated my understanding of digital archiving, a field I'd embraced years ago. But more importantly, I come from an era of paper trails, of meticulous cross-referencing, of hidden annotations in margins only I would understand, of carbon copies and handwritten drafts. My archive wasn't just digital, the original documents, the handwritten notes meticulously detailing provenance and context, the extensive correspondences with other scholars discussing my findings as they developed, they told the true story, the untainted version. And Marcus, in his academic vanity and profound arrogance, assumed I was too far gone to notice his digital vandalism, or too technically inept to trace its source or methods. He underestimated me, profoundly. That was his first critical error. He also underestimated my network, the deep connections forged over 50 years in academia, a global community of scholars, archivists, librarians, people who valued truth, intellectual honesty, and loyalty above all else, people who knew my mind, my work. First, I needed communication, secure communication, beyond their surveillance. Marcus and Chloe monitored my landline phone, my mobile, which Chloe often borrowed, my email accounts, which Marcus had helped me secure with new passwords he now controlled, even my physical mail, as Chloe's daily interception proved. But they didn't monitor the old ham radio set Arthur used to tinker with in the attic workshop. They considered it junk, part of the clutter they planned to clear out. I hadn't used it in years. Arthur was the enthusiast, but I'd listened, learned the basics by osmosis, the principles of shortwave, frequency hopping, call signs, they stick in a mind trained to retain detail. Late at night, feigning sleepwalking, a new symptom I began to exhibit, muttering about Arthur, confusing night and day, something they readily accepted, even documented. As further evidence of my decline, I made my way to the dusty attic. It took several nights, incremental progress under the guise of confused wandering, cleaning corroded battery contacts with vinegar smuggled from the kitchen, checking vacuum tubes, consulting Arthur's old, faded manuals by the dimmest penlight, hopping the old call signs. The specific frequencies we used to chat with friends abroad still worked, hopping someone was listening. The risk of discovery was immense, the attic floorboards creaked, Chloe was a light sleeper. And then, after 4 tense nights, a crackle, a faint hiss, and then a voice, faint, distorted by static, but there, recognizable, an old colleague, Professor Alistair Finch, brilliant medievalist turned forensic archivist, retired now, living quietly in the Scottish Highlands, sharp as a tack, fiercely loyal, and thankfully a fellow radio enthusiast. We established coded communication, quickly, intuitively, using historical references, dates of obscure battles, catalogue numbers of specific manuscripts, titles of forgotten 17th century pamphlets as our shifting key, something Marcus, despite his academic pretensions with his superficial knowledge, would never decipher even if he suspected. Alistair was horrified, stunned by the scale and malice of it, but perhaps not entirely surprised. He'd heard whispers, third hand, the ones Marcus had carefully planted through academic contacts, but hadn't believed them, knowing my work, my mind. He became my lifeline, my operative on the outside, my link to the resources I desperately needed. My next step, meticulously documenting the academic sabotage, the poisoning of my life's work. Marcus had altered digital scans, corrupted text files, introduced subtle but damaging errors, but he hadn't destroyed the original source documents. Yet, he likely planned to, after gaining full control, perhaps staging a convenient accident, a water leak, a small fire, once I was safely institutionalized, or worse. He kept the archive room, my library, locked, but I knew that house, its history, its secrets, its construction quirks. Arthur and I had renovated it extensively years ago. There was an old service hatch, connecting the wall cavity between the library and the adjoining guest bedroom, boarded up decades ago during renovations, hidden behind a heavy Jacobean tapestry Arthur had bought me. Maury feigned confusion, nights spent wandering into the guest room, muttering about drafts, cold spots, gave me the cover I needed to work. Using a small screwdriver liberated from Arthur's toolbox, I carefully, silently, loosened the old plasterboard screws, night after painstaking night, heart pounding at every creak, every distant sound. Inside the archive, my sanctuary, now violated, tainted by his presence, his deceit. Working by the dimmest emergency-led light Alistair had managed to get smuggled in, hidden inside a large print book delivery. I began the painstaking process, comparing Marcus's altered digitized files, stored on my confiscated laptop hard drive, which I'd managed to access remotely using an old network backdoor password Arthur had set up years ago. A system admin password Marcus wouldn't even know existed. Comparing these corrupted files against my original handwritten notes, my physical documents, my typed drafts with correction fluid and marginalia. The discrepancies were stark, deliberate, malicious, dates changed to create glaring anachronisms a first-year student would spot, quotes misattributed to discredit reliable sources, conclusions subtly twisted to seem illogical, irrational, the work of a failing mind. He had even inserted fake citations to non-existent articles. I photographed everything, every corrupted digital file compared side by side with the pristine original, using a tiny burner phone, essentially a miniature camera, that Alistair had arranged to be smuggled to me, hidden inside a bulk delivery of incontinent supplies, a delivery Chloe had unpacked with a barely concealed smirk of satisfaction. The humiliation fueled my resolve. Evidence mounting, page by digital page, photograph by photograph. Then the finances, the brazen theft hidden behind care expenses. They controlled the current accounts, intercepted the statements, blocked my online access, but banks keep records, deep, detailed records, transaction histories, transfer logs, archived statements. Alastair, using his own considerable contacts within the financial world, and a carefully worded, formal request ostensibly for historical research into 17th-century banking practices and asset transfers, began the arduous process of pulling my complete transaction histories, wire transfer details, account closure documentation, from multiple institutions. The pattern that emerged was damning, unequivocal, a systematic siphoning of funds, starting small, escalating rapidly, transfers to newly opened offshore accounts under Chloe's maiden name, discovered through tracing routing numbers, large cash withdrawals consistently just below mandatory reporting thresholds, liquidation of blue-chip stocks at suspiciously low points, funneling the proceeds elsewhere, mortgaging the house itself without my knowledge using the fraudulent power of attorney. They weren't just spending money, they were gutting my entire financial existence, preparing to leave me destitute, entirely dependent on their charity, prisoners of their control. While gathering this mountain of evidence, piece by painstaking piece, I maintained the facade, perfectly, flawlessly. I became more forgetful, more frail in my movements, more dependent, asking Chloe to help me fasten buttons I could easily manage, letting Marcus guide me slowly by the arm on walks around the garden, nodding vaguely during conversations, occasionally asking the same question twice. It was the hardest performance of my life, swallowing the bile, smiling sweetly while they patronized me, patted my head like a child, discussed my care needs and mental state in front of me as if I weren't there, or couldn't comprehend. Each condescending smile, each feigned expression of deep concern, each blatant lie told to my face, fueled the icy fire within me, sharpened my focus, hardened my resolve. They were planning the final stages, I knew it, the checkmate move, a formal meeting with my lawyer, Mr. Davies, my doctor, Dr. Peterson, and the geriatric psychiatrist they'd already primed, Dr. Evans, to formalize the competency assessment, to gain full legal control, guardianship, the power to institutionalize me, to sell my home, to control everything. They scheduled it at my house, my desecrated home, wanting witnesses, the lawyer, the doctors, to see my confusion and frailty in my natural environment, a carefully staged piece of theatre. They thought they were orchestrating my final defeat, the legal rubber stamp on my erasure, the tidy conclusion to their scheme. They had no idea they were walking into my carefully constructed archive, an archive detailing their own greed, their own cruelty, their own destruction. Alastair and I worked quickly, communicating via coded bursts over the radio, encrypting files. He compiled the evidence into a devastating dossier, meticulously organized, cross-referenced, irrefutable. Digital forensics reports from a specialist Alastair knew, detailing Marcus's file tampering, time-stamped, traced directly to Marcus's university IP address, using university servers, a breach of ethics in itself. High-resolution photographs of the original, untampered documents, safe now, Alastair had arranged for a discreet, archival consultation visit from a trusted former student of mine, now a senior curator at a major museum. She had arrived under the guise of discussing a potential donation, and smuggled the most critical original items out, replacing them with convincing replicas Marcus wouldn't examine closely, assuming them to be the originals he hadn't yet destroyed. Complete financial records, tracing every stolen penny, every forged signature on checks, every liquidated asset, right into their hidden offshore accounts and newly acquired luxury goods. Credit card statements obtained by Alastair showed extravagant spending. Copies of incriminating emails Marcus had sent, disparaging my work to colleagues, boasting about his editorial interventions, using his official university account, obtained by Alastair through a sympathetic IT contact at Marcus's university, someone disgusted by Marcus's arrogance and plagiarism rumors that had followed him for years. Sworn statements from my real friends, longtime colleagues Marcus had lied to, now fully informed by Alastair, ready to testify about my clarity, my unchanged intellect, my ongoing research contributions, right up until the attentive care began and I was isolated. And one final piece, something unexpected, utterly damning. During one of my late-night wandering sessions, searching for a specific box of Arthur's old correspondence in Chloe's occupied room, I found Chloe's personal diary, hidden foolishly, tucked under lingerie in a drawer, a cheap lockable diary, the lock easily picked with a hairpin. Filled not with introspection, but with breathtaking vanity, simmering resentment, and explicit details of their plan, her contempt for me, her impatience for my demise, her fantasies of spending my money, dates, amounts, cruel observations about my perceived decline, corroborating everything. Crude, damning, vicious, and utterly authentic, her handwriting unmistakable. The stage was set, the players were assembling, summoned by Marcus and Chloe themselves for the final act. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, looking uncomfortable but professional, my doctor, Dr. Peterson, his face etched with concern, the psychiatrist, Dr. Evans, briefcase in hand ready to pronounce judgment, even a couple of distant relatives, Marcus's cousins, invited to witness the sad necessity of it all, to act as supportive witnesses to Marcus and Chloe's difficult decision. They arrived, solemn faces, hushed tones, preparing for a difficult conversation about poor Aunt Evie needing to be taken care of for her own good. Marcus and Chloe played their parts beautifully, the devoted, heartbroken caregivers, forced to make an agonizing choice. Chloe dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. Marcus spoke in low, sorrowful tones. They presented their carefully constructed narrative, my accelerating decline, my confusion, my memory lapses, the evidence of my failing memory, citing the very errors Marcus himself had planted in my research notes, twisting my actual complex arguments into proof of irrationality. They spoke of financial mismanagement, bills unpaid, risky investments I'd supposedly made, the urgent need to protect my assets from myself. I sat quietly in Arthur's armchair, head bowed slightly, hands trembling slightly, looking frail, perhaps a little lost, just as expected. I let their words wash over me, meeting no one's eye, reinforcing their narrative. The psychiatrist, Dr. Evans, began asking gentle questions, testing my memory, my orientation, dates, names, current events. I answered truthfully, but with deliberate pauses, slight hesitations, allowing a carefully calibrated degree of confusion to show, reinforcing their preconceptions, playing the part they had written for me. Marcus exchanged a smug, almost imperceptible glance with Chloe. Relief washed over his face. They thought it was almost over. The final curtain was about to fall. Then, at the agreed signal, a subtle, rasping cough I feigned, deliberately weak. Alastair, Professor Finch, who had arrived unexpectedly a few minutes earlier, claiming to be passing through town on unrelated business and wanting to pay his respects to his old friend, stepped forward from the back of the room where he'd been standing quietly. "Forgive my interruption," he said, his voice calm but carrying the unmistakable authority of decades of scholarship, cutting through the cloying atmosphere, "but I believe there's some additional context, some rather pertinent documentation, that might be relevant to Dr. Hayes's current situation, and this assessment." He placed a single, thick, meticulously organized binder on the polished coffee table in the center of the room, right next to Chloe's delicate teacup. Silence, a heavy, stunned silence. Marcus stared at the binder, confusion warring with dawning alarm on his face, His eyes darted towards me, then back to Alastair. Chloe paled visibly, her hand flying to her throat. "What is this, Alastair?" Marcus demanded, his voice suddenly tight, sharp, losing the smooth veneer. "This meeting is private." "Evidence," Alastair replied simply, his gaze steady, unwavering, locking onto Marcus, regarding the systematic financial exploitation, the calculated abuse of trust, and the deliberate malicious sabotage of Dr. Evelyn Hayes's academic legacy, perpetrated over the last 18 months by Mr. Marcus Thorne and Ms. Chloe Daniels. He opened the binder, revealing the first section divider clearly labelled Financial Fraud. Page after page, highlighted bank statements, forged signatures circled in red, offshore account numbers and transfer logs, credit card bills detailing luxury purchases matching withdrawal dates, the fraudulent mortgage documentation. Then he turned to the next section, Academic Sabotage. Digital forensics reports, screenshots comparing original text with Marcus's altered versions, timestamps, IP address logs from the university servers, printouts of Marcus's self-incriminating emails to his contact at the press, boasting about discrediting me, planning to repurpose my research. Then perjured testimony and slander, statements from my colleagues, attesting to my lucidity, detailing Marcus's lies about my mental state, copies of letters Marcus had sent attempting to undermine my reputation. And finally, the last section, COROBORATING evidence CDANILS. Photocopies of key pages from Chloe's diary, detailing the plan, the motives, the contempt, laid bare in her own loopy handwriting. The room was utterly silent, except for Chloe's sharp intake of breath, a strangled gasp like a landed fish. Mr. Davies, my lawyer, leaned forward, his eyes widening as he scanned the pages, his expression shifting rapidly from professional concern to shock to cold, righteous anger. He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time that day, and saw not confusion but clarity. Dr. Peterson, my doctor, looked stunned, betrayed, glancing between the evidence and the couple who had fed him lies. The psychiatrist, Dr. Evans, slowly, deliberately closed his notebook, his assessment abruptly, definitively concluded. He looked mortified, realizing how thoroughly he had been manipulated. Marcus lunged for the binder, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and rage. "This is absurd. Lies, fabrications. She's manipulated you, Alastair. She's senile, I tell you." Alastair calmly placed a firm hand on the binder, preventing Marcus from snatching it. "Everything is meticulously documented, Marcus. Verified, cross-referenced. Copies have already been lodged securely with Dr. Hayes's primary legal team, who are standing by, as well as with the University Ethics Committee, the National Banking Fraud Division, and, I believe, several prominent journalists who specialize in elder exploitation cases." Journalists, that word hung in the air like a guillotine's blade. Marcus froze, his face draining of all color, turning a pasty grey, a mask of disbelief crumbling into dawning abject horror. He understood implications. He knew what journalistic exposure meant for his fragile academic career, his social standing. Chloe started to sob, not quiet tears of remorse, but loud, ugly wails of fury, of defeat, of self-pity. "He made me do it, it was all his idea," she shrieked hysterically, pointing a trembling, accusatory finger at her husband. "He manipulated me, said we deserved it." The invited relatives, the cousins, looked on, aghast, jaws dropped, understanding dawning in their eyes, disgust replacing the pity they had felt for Marcus and Chloe just moments before. They began edging away, distancing themselves physically. Mr. Davies stood up, his voice like chipped ice, cutting through Chloe's hysterics. "Marcus, Chloe, I strongly suggest it's best if you leave. Now, my associate will be contacting you and your legal representatives very shortly regarding potential criminal charges, including fraud, theft, forgery, conspiracy, and elder abuse, as well as immediate civil recovery actions to reclaim Dr. Hayes's assets. They stumbled out, broken, exposed, their carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces in an instant. Marcus didn't even look back. Chloe shot me a look of pure hatred before fleeing. The oppressive weight in the room lifted instantly. The air cleared. It felt like I could finally breathe again, truly breathe. I looked around the room, at the shocked faces, the lawyer, the doctors, Alistair, my true friend. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt free, vindicated. The fight wasn't entirely over. Complex legal battles lay ahead, reclaiming my finances, untangling their complex web of deceit, would be arduous. Some money was likely gone forever, spent or hidden too well. But my mind, my work, my reputation, myself, I had reclaimed them, fiercely, decisively. They tried to bury me under layers of lies and manipulation. They didn't know I was a seed, buried in the rich, fertile soil of my own history, my own knowledge, ready to grow back stronger, fiercer, more resilient than ever. The archive, my legacy, would be safe now, protected, my life's work secured. Their betrayal, their greed, their cruelty, it wouldn't define my final chapter. It would be a footnote, a dark passage, but not the main narrative. My righteous fury, channeled not into blind rage, but into meticulous strategy, cold logic, irrefutable evidence, that asterisk would be the story. They wanted to erase me. Instead, they forged me into something unbreakable. Let the reckoning truly begin. Wow, just wow. Victoria here again, catching my breaths. The sheer audacity, the meticulous planning, the cold-blooded precision of Evelyn's counterattack, it truly leaves you breathless, doesn't it? Using their own arrogance, their own underestimation of her, as weapons against them, playing the part they cast for her, the frail, confused old woman, while simultaneously building an unshakable, multi-layered case, piece by painstaking piece, like the historian she is. And the final reveal, not with shouting or tears, but with calm, documented evidence, laid out like an academic thesis proving their guilt beyond any shadow of a doubt, presented in her own home, the scene of their intended final victory. It's devastatingly effective, chillingly brilliant. She didn't just expose them, she annihilated their reputations, their credibility, their entire constructed reality, using the very tools of research, evidence, and intellectual rigor they sought to destroy and discredit, the ultimate poetic justice. The consequences for Marcus and Chloe were swift and severe, just as Alistair and the lawyers promised. Professionally ruined, Marcus was immediately suspended, then fired from the university following an ethics investigation triggered by Alistair's evidence, his academic reputation shredded, blacklisted, becoming a pariah in the field he so desperately wanted to conquer. His stolen research ideas built on Evelyn's work were exposed. Socially ostracized, even their own families, the cousins present at the meeting, distanced themselves, disgusted by the depths of their betrayal, their cruelty, they became utterly isolated. Legally entangled, facing a barrage of criminal charges, fraud, elder exploitation, forgery, conspiracy, the civil suits aimed to recover every traceable cent, though, as Evelyn suspected, much was likely already spent or hidden in complex offshore trusts that took years to partially unravel. They lost everything, including, eventually, each other, turning on one another in bitter recrimination. But for Evelyn, Dr. Hayes, the victory wasn't just financial or legal, it was existential. It was reclaiming her narrative, her identity. She reclaimed her home, purging it of their presence, their bad taste, slowly restoring her cherished belongings. She reclaimed her work, her passion, her voice in the academic world, louder and more respected than ever. The archive is now secured, managed by a professional trust she established in collaboration with Alistair and her university, ensuring its integrity and accessibility for future generations of scholars. Her name, cleared beyond doubt, her reputation burnished by the ordeal, seen now not just as a brilliant historian, but as a survivor, a fighter, a testament to incredible resilience and intellectual fortitude. She's still sharp, still researching, still publishing, perhaps a little warier now, a little less trusting, understandably so, the scars remain. Her fury, that cold, precise, righteous anger, it wasn't just destructive towards them, it was creative. It rebuilt her life on her own terms. It fueled her fight for survival and vindication. It makes you think, doesn't it, about the hidden vulnerabilities even the strongest among us can face, about the insidious nature of gaslighting, about the power of truth, meticulously gathered, bravely presented. Was it justice, or was it revenge? Does the distinction even matter when the betrayal cuts that deep, threatening to erase your entire existence? Evelyn found her power, rediscovered her strength, in the place they least expected it, the place they tried to undermine, her mind, her history, her disciplined intellect, channeled through righteous rage. What do you think about Evelyn's methods, her incredible resilience? Let me know in the comments below. I read them all, and stories like these deserve discussion. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, share this story, especially if you know someone who might feel isolated or underestimated. There are more stories like Evelyn's that need to be told, more voices that need amplification, more survivors whose strength needs to be celebrated. Thank you for listening. I'm Victoria, and I'll be back soon with another unforgettable story. Stay strong, stay aware, and never underestimate the power of a quiet mind pushed too far.